Chapter Sex and Words from Kate Lister, A Curious History of Sex Unbound. It's pity she's a whore. The whore in Horse of Yore. Language is an important battleground in the fight for social equality. As the linguist Daniel Chandler succinctly put in, language constitutes our world. It doesn't just record it or label it. Language is fluid and malleable. It drives social attitudes rather than simply expressing them. To see the evolution of language, we only have to look at what was once everyday terminology. To describe people of color, half caste was one perfectly acceptable for a person of mixed race, just as colored was an accepted term for a black person. Such words were not thought of as offensive, merely descriptive, and can occasionally still be heard in usage, though thankfully less often. But when we break down the power structures implicit in such phrases, we can begin to understand how words do reinforce and create our reality. A person who is half caste is by definition half of something. They are half formed, half made, half a person rather than a whole person in their own right. A person who is colored has been metaphorically colored in, which suggests an original state of not being colored in or white. It reinforces difference and tacitly suggests racial hierarchy. We might not immediately recognize the implications of such phrases, but describing someone as half formed simply reinforces racial attitudes. As Chandler argued, it makes our reality, it does not record it. Language that reflects the humanity of the person or people being described is a constantly evolving process, and while political correctness frequently comes in for scorn, we cannot and will not achieve social equality if the language we use to describe marginalized groups only reinforces stigma. Language informs much of the debate around LGBTQ rights, body issues, ageism, and of course, gender. The reclamation of terms of abuse is a linguistic minefield where no one has written down the rules, but we all know there are rules. Fag, hoe, bitch, etc. can function as terms of inclusion and even affection when used within specific groups. As a straight white woman, I cannot tell a gay man a queer, but I can call my female friend a bitch, whereas a straight man cannot, though a gay man might be able to. Minefield, indeed. When a term of abuse is reclaimed and owned by the people it once stigmatized, it is a deviant action, one that takes the power away from the oppressor, galvanizes an identity within the formerly oppressed, and sticks to politically incorrect fingers up at the establishment. Of course, many argue that such words used in any context only serve to reinforce a prejudice, as such words are never shaken free of historical baggage. They create reality rather than recording it. The word whore is also in a state of reclamation among certain groups of the sex work community. Others reject it entirely. The truth is that I should not have used whore in the Horse of Yore website. It's not my word, and if you are not a sex worker, it's not your either. It's a term of abuse that sex workers hear every day by those seeking to devalue and shame them, and I had not fully appreciated that. I used whore to refer to transgressive sexuality, like slut or slag, rather than a woman who sells sex. I have always considered the word to be far bigger than that. I have had feedback from many sex workers questioning my use of the term, and for a while I gave serious consideration to changing it. But the history of that word is an important one, and one that I want to emphasize. Debate around what whore actually means is a conversation worth having. The German dramatist George Buchner once wrote that freedom and whores are the most cosmopolitan items under the sun. But what does the word whore actually mean? Where has it come from, and what does someone have to do to earn that particular title? Why was Joan of Arc, who died a virgin, called the French whore? And why was Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, attacked as the English whore by her Catholic enemies? French revolutionaries called Marie Antoinette the Australian whore, Anne Boleyn was the great whore, and in the 2016 presidential campaign, Hillary Clinton was repeatedly attacked by Trump supporters as a whore. Perhaps we think we know perfectly well that what we mean should we ever choose to drop the W bomb, but the word is historically and culturally complex. This simple monosyllable is loaded with over 1,000 years of attempting to control and shame women by stigmatizing their sexuality. The word is so old that its precise origins are lost in the midst of time, but it can be traced to the Old Norse hora, adulteress. Hora has multiple derivatives such as the Danish hor, the Swedish hora, the Dutch hoer, and the Old English, Old High German hura. Going back even further to the Proto Indo European language, the common ancestor of Indo European languages, hor has roots in quor, meaning to like, desire. Quor is a base that has produced words in other languages for lover, such as the Latin caras, the Old Irish cara, and the Old Persian kama, meaning to desire. Hor is not a universal word. In the indigenous Aborigines, First Nation people, and native Hawaiians have no word for whore or indeed for prostitution. From the 12th century, whore was a term of abuse for a sexually unchaste woman, but it did not specifically mean a sex worker. Thomas of Chobham's 13th century definition of a whore was any woman who has sex outside marriage. Hands up all those who have just learned they are a 13th century whore. Shakespeare used whore nearly 100 times in his plays, including Othello, Hamlet, and King Lear. But in this place, it doesn't mean someone who sells sex. It means a promiscuous woman. John Webster's The White Devil, 1612, explores narratives around badly behaved women. In one memorable scene, Monticello defines what a whore is. Shall I expound whore to you? Sure I shall. I will give their perfect character. They are first sweetmeats which rot the eater, in man's nostrils poisoned perfumes. They are cozening alchemy, shipwrecks in calmest weather. What are whores? Cold Russian winters that appear so barren, as if that nature had forgot the spring. They are the true material fire of hell, worse than those tributes in the low countries paid, exactions upon meat, drink, garments, sleep, even on man's perdition, his sin. They are those brittle evidences of law which forfeit all a wretched man's estate. For leaving out one syllable, what are whores? They are those fluttering bells have all one tune. At weddings and at funerals, your rich whores are only treasures by extortion, filled and emptied by cursed riot. They are worse than dead bodies which are begged at gallows and wrought upon by surgeons to teach man wherein he is imperfect. What a whore! She is like a guilty counterfeited coin, which whosoever first stamps it brings in trouble all that receives it. Monticello doesn't admit it, but what is driving this rant is a fear of women. Fear that they can wield power over men. They can teach man wherein he is imperfect. Here, a whore is not a sex worker. She is a woman who has authority over a man and must be shamed into silence at all costs. Historically, whore has been used to attack those who have upset the status quo and asserted themselves, usually in an attempt to reassert sexual control and dominance over her. But unlike the word prostitute, whore is not tied to a profession but to a perceived moral state. Which is why many powerful women with no connection to the sex trade have been attacked as whores. Mary Wollstonecraft, Phulon Devi, even Margaret Thatcher were all labelled whores. The word is an attempt to shame, humiliate, and ultimately subdue its target. And your average woman on the street is just as likely to be called a whore as a world leader. Perhaps even more so. Whore is a nasty insult today, but calling someone a whore in the early modern period was regarded as such a serious defamation of character that you could be taken for court for slander. By far the most frequent insults cited in these cases where a woman has been slandered is whore, and myriad creative variants thereon: stinking whore, ticket buying whore, drunken pisspot whore, less petticoat whore, and dog and bitch whore have all been recorded. In 1664, Anne Blagg claimed that Anne Cutsford had called her a poxy-arsed whore. Poor Isabel Yaxley complained of a neighbor alleging that she was a whore who could be fucked for a pennyworth of fish in 1667. In 1695, Susan Town of London accused Jane Addams of shouting to "Come out, you whore, and scratch your mangy arse as I do." In 1699, Isabel Stone of York brought a suit against John Newbold for calling her a whore, a common whore, and a piss-arsed whore, a bitch and a piss-arsed whore. And in 1663, Robert Hayard was hauled before the Cheshire courts for calling Elizabeth Young a salt bitch and a sordid whore. In court, he claimed he could prove Elizabeth was a whore and she should just go home and wash the stains out of the coat. "Come out, you bitch, I will maul you. I'll kips my arf, you whore, I will nab your cuckold." Examples of unfeminine language from New Art of Mystery of Gossiping, 1770. In order to prove a case of slander, you would need a witness to the insult, to prove the accusation was untrue with a character witness, and to show how your reputation had been damaged by being called such names. The punishment for slander ranged from fines and being ordered to publicly apologize through to excommunication, though this was rare. One example of punishment occurred in 1691, where William Halliwell was ordered to publicly apologize in church to Peter Leigh for defaming his character. I, William Halliwell, forgetting my duty to walk in love and charity towards my neighbor, have uttered spoken and published several scandalous, defamatory, and reproachful words and against Peter Leigh. I do hereby recant, revoke, and recall the said words as altogether false, scandalous, and untrue. I am unfailingly sorry, and I hereby confess and acknowledge that I have much wronged and injured him. The accusation of whore was particularly damaging as it directly affected a woman's value on the marriage market. So when Thomas Ellerton called Judith Glandering a whore who went from barn to barn and from tinkers to fiddlers in 1685, he was doing more than being abusive. He was preventing her finding a husband. In 1652, Cecily Pedley alleged she had been called a whore with the intention to prevent her marriage with a person of good quality. It could even affect business. In 1687, a justice of the peace decided that calling an innkeeper's wife a whore was actionable because it had affected trade. There are numerous slander cases brought by a husband whose wife had been called a whore. Calling someone's wife a whore was a particularly devastating insult, as it not only insulted the wife but also impugned the husband as a cuckold and questioned his ability to sexually satisfy the missus. In 1685, for example, Abraham Beaver was accused of ordering Richard Winnan to "Get thee home, thou cuckold, thou will find Thomas Fox in bed with thy wife." Although cases of men alleging slander were less frequent, they were too often sexual in nature. In 1680, Elizabeth Aborn of London was taken to court by Thomas Richardson for saying that his penis was rotten with the pox. Men were also attacked as whoremongers, cuckolds, bastard getters, rogues, and in one case a jealous pated fools and ass. Men brought cases against people who had called them thieves, beggars, or drunkards. In 1699, for example, Thomas Hewitson was brought before the courts in York for calling Thomas Daniel a mumper, beggar. He was a mumper and went about the country from door to door mumping. By the end of the 17th century, there was a notable decline in the number of slander cases brought before the church courts. Historians have long debated why this may have been the case. It may be that as cities swelled and the population grew, the courts became more concerned with crimes other than women calling each other hedge whores and poxy-arsed whores. It may just be that there was a shift in culture and taking your slagging matches before a judge became less the done thing. By 1817, UK law ruled that calling a married woman or a single one a whore is not actionable because fornication and adultery are subjects of spiritual, not temporal censures. As the above chart shows, since the 17th century there has been a notable decline in the use of the word whore. Until the end of the 17th century, whore was still a legal term and turns up in no less than 163 trials at the Old Bailey from 1679 until 1800. Historians such as Richter Norton have examined how common prostitute came to replace whore as a legal terminology for a person who sells sexual services. I suspect the sharp decline in the usage of whore at the end of the 17th century is linked to the linguistic shift from legal terminology to a pure insult. Today, whore is largely confined to abusive and coarse speech. However, like the word slut, whore is also in a state of reclamation and can be used to directly challenge the shame the word has carried for hundreds of years. Whore may be a term of abuse, but it is one rooted in fear of female independence and sexual autonomy. Its progression from meaning a woman who desires to an insult seeking to shame that desire traces cultural attitudes around female sexuality. I do not use whore to shame, I use it to recognize all those who rattled cultural sensibilities enough to be called a whore. I use it to deflate the shame within it. I use it to remember that our language shapes how we view each other and it is constantly evolving. Historically, if you desire, you are a whore. If you have sex outside of marriage, you are a whore. If you transgress and threaten the man, you are a whore. We are all historical whores. Three excellent sources to read more about Tudor slander codes are Dina Winchest's Sexual Slander and its Social Context in England, 1660 to 1700, with special reference to Cheshire and Sussex,